Well, ladies, why don't we kick off, and we'll let others join us as they get there. So with that, welcome to this month's SOAR Special Needs Disability Ministry Network. It is June 2023. And let me just kick us off with prayer, and then we'll kind of dive in, and the day is yours. So, but let's pray real quick. Our gracious Heavenly Father God, we just thank you so much for this day. Thank you for all that you do and the blessings you give us. God, I just thank you for those that are here, those who signed up and not able to make it. Just pray that you work with each and every person. Just pray that we can be effective in working with our churches and helping our churches to be able to welcome individuals with special needs and disabilities. And God, just bless our time here together. Help us be able to sharpen one another and just be able to support one another. And God, we just thank you for all that you do now, and bless us this day. Pray this in great and holy name. Amen. All right. Well, why don't we just real quick, let's do a couple things. Introduce yourself. Let us know your name, where you're from, and then what you do. And then if there are any issues that you'd like to talk through or questions you'd like to talk about, mention that, and then we'll circle back to that. If you're here, just kind of follow along and learn and see. Fantastic. Again, this is just open up for everyone to jump in at any time. But London, I'm going to throw you on the spot. Why don't you start off by introducing yourself?
Perfect. I'm London. I don't really like talking a lot, so I'll probably stay quiet. I'm a listener. I am the kids director at our church, Calvary Chapel, Lake of the Ozarks. I've been doing this for about a year. Still fairly new to that. Within this year, I had a baby and took 6 weeks off, so not really officially a year if you count those weeks off. Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri. And I think we just did the first call with you like months ago, almost a year ago now, and I've been a little busy, so we haven't really moved forward. So I just wanted to hop on and hear what other people had to say. I don't really have any like specific questions, but I need to make some more progress with this for our church and give people an update.
Perfect. Well, you've got a good excuse. You've been a little busy. So give yourself grace. It's okay.
Yeah. We just did our kids program last week too. So I got back, worked on our kids program, like our version of VBS, and this week is a lot more chill.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, Renee, introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Renee Higbee, and I reside in Idaho. In Boise, Idaho. And I'm here on behalf of Champion Interpreting Services, my colleague who made the initial contact with SOAR, unfortunately had a conflict with his schedule due to an interpreting assignment that took him out of state. And so I'm here in his place. For myself, part of the reason that I work with Gabriel is that we interpret together at Bridgepoint Church here in Boise, and we provide interpreting services. I'm also a mother of a son who is deaf and has a cochlear implant. He's now 23. Wow. I have a daughter who's hearing, and she's 21. My husband and I have actually just celebrated our 25-year anniversary on Tuesday, just a couple of days ago.
Congrats.
So that was exciting. I've actually been in ministry. It's interesting when, if I were to really look back, the first deaf person that I ever met was my son. And at the time, the universal newborn hearing screening wasn't in place. So it took a while for insurance purposes to realize that he was profoundly deaf bilaterally, and then what our options were. But we started signing right away when we realized that there was potential for hearing loss. And I'm an American Sign Language teacher as well. And yeah, I mean, again, starting out with interpreting in the religious setting, but then going on to become a K through 12 interpreter and in the collegiate setting and in a variety of different areas. But I've realized as I am completing a master's degree that my real passion is advocacy and helping parents to help themselves and connect them with other families. And so it was just, I think, really God's provision and his plan. And for me to connect with Champion Interpreting Services, and for us to have this this fellowship that is like none other. I think when you really trust God that he's putting the people into your life, so that way you can do his work. Wow, it's amazing how many opportunities open up when you humbly submit to what God has for you. So I'm here on behalf of Champion Interpreting, but have a lot of different things to offer in that respect.
Cool. So just curious, from a sign language interpretation point, do you specialize in anything in particular with that? From, some of the interpreters I've talked to, they told me and I don't know any of this, but they said, well, I'd pretty much just, for instance, I had one who she said she just signs music.
Okay.
And I guess there's a whole group that.
Yeah, I think that you, personality wise, you can specialize in certain things that you're passionate about. Having a music background, yeah, I definitely love music, right? But I'm K through 12 and have done community and collegiate and medical and pretty diverse, like my colleague Gabriel. And in that, I love to try new things and hone my skills. And because realistically, you don't know what opportunities God has for you, and you want to be continually expanding what you know, and that level of comfort. Like, you don't want to be stagnant, right? So you want to try and stretch yourself and to grow. So while I have an educational interpreting degree, and I've spent the bulk of my time ed K through 12 and college interpreting, there's so much more that's out there. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. Perfect. Okay. All right. And again, I'm Doc Hunsley. I'm the executive director and founder of SOAR. And so, Renee, this is your first time meeting me, so I'll just give you a little bit quick background on SOAR and who we are. As I tell everyone today, 26% of the U.S. population today has a diagnosis of special needs or disability, making them the largest minority group in the United States. And therefore, that's why SOAR Special Needs exists. And we exist to transform the lives of special families and empower them to soar in their local and faith communities. We help answer the three main questions that every family with individual with disability has. First, will my child ever be able to provide for themselves? Second question, who will take care of my child once I'm gone? And then the third question, who will take care of me as a parent or a caregiver? So we answer all three of those questions with our current and future programming. My background, everyone calls me Doc because I'm actually a pediatric ER doctor. Got sick taking care of my patients and almost died, should have died, and was forced out of my career, long-term disability. I was blessed. My second son, Mark, when he was 8 months old, he had his first seizure, lasted over 4 hours. And by the time he was 18 months, we got the diagnosis of Dravet syndrome, a very rare genetic seizure disorder. And by the time he was 2, got the diagnosis of autism. My wife's also a pediatrician, so we went from being physicians who took care of a lot of kids with special needs to now all of a sudden being a parent of a child with special needs. It was the first time in our life we finally got it and understood just how difficult it is to be a parent. It's 24/7, 365. You never get a break. And I share all the time. I've lost count how many times I've been in public where complete strangers have told us that we're not just bad parents, we're horrible parents because of the meltdown that our son's having, or he's harming himself and I'm doing the proper things to protect him. And people think we're endangering our son. And I've had police come up and threaten to arrest me or pull their gun on me and threaten to tase me. That's everyday life for our families and parents, and it's all due to lack of education and knowledge. And so advocacy awareness is a big thing for me. I had when he was 2 years old, I got the opportunity to become the children's pastor at the church we were attending at that point. Grew a children's ministry from 100 kids to 1,000 kids over a three and a half year period of time. Went to the senior pastor and said, I want to start a special needs ministry. Having my son, I also identified a couple other kids with special needs. And his immediate response to me was, no, I don't want those kind of people here. And that was my first awareness of how few churches are willing to accept individuals with special needs. Yeah. In fact, today it's only 11% of churches, of all churches, synagogues, and parishes will welcome individuals with special needs, disabilities into their church. 89% will turn them away.
Wow.
And then my story continues. If you fast forward 12 years ago now, my son was cured of everything when he was born into heaven at the age of 5.5. So we were blessed with him for 5.5 years, learned all the highs and lows of being a parent, then walked through the grief of losing a child with special needs. And then 7 weeks after he passed away, my intestine exploded. I almost died once again. I always joke, I feel like a cat. I've had so many near-death experiences, and I hate cats, so it's God's little joke with me. And then 10 months after that, we left the church we were at, and in order for me to heal emotionally, physically, spiritually, I need to serve other people. I need to help others. And so we started going to a new church. I met with a children's pastor, told him that, and next thing I knew, I got a phone call from him and the senior pastor, and they said, Doc, we kind of heard about you. We've stalked you socially. We know what you're about. We want to have a world-class children's ministry, but in order to do that, we need to have a special needs ministry. Would you start one for us? So that's how SOAR started. It started 11 and a half, almost 12 years ago now. Okay. September will be 12 years ago. And we just started with what we knew we had at the church. I became their disability pastor as a volunteer position. Started with 3 individuals, 2 kids and 1 adult. I recruited 20 volunteers in my first month and was on staff for 8 years. When I left 8 years later, we were serving over 800 individuals with disabilities and had a volunteer base of over 2,500. So, that's how I got blessed. And then we became an independent nonprofit 3.5 years ago. And one of the things that I'm incredibly passionate about now is assisting churches in doing disability ministry. I've got a goal to assist at least 1,000. And to date, I've now assisted over 550 churches, parishes, synagogues in creating disability ministry throughout the United States and 17 countries around the world. And was happy to meet with London and Calvary and do theirs. So that's real quick, a little bit of my background, why we have these times to meet together. So Rahel, welcome. I don't know if you're able to talk with us. And that Rahel is another amazing person, one of the another group lady in her church I've assisted to. But Rahel, just introduce yourself to everyone here and tell them about you and what you do.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I'm late.
You're fine. I told everyone ahead of time, so you're absolutely fine.
My name is Rahel Kabada. I have 4 kids, and my oldest is 19, Caleb. He has special needs, so that's how I got into this thing. And at church, we did not have a special needs service for my son, so I started it a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, with Doc's help. And we're doing good. We got some kids. We do awareness once a year, and this is our 2nd year doing VBS for our kids.
Awesome.
So we're doing good.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Rahel is here in the Kansas City area, Overland Park area. Okay. So just real quick, London is down at Lake of the Ozarks, and Renee is a sign language interpreter with ministry and helping churches with that in Boise, Idaho. So we're across the country here. So with that, we've now gotten our introductions out. What can we do for one another? Any questions, any concerns, anything you got on your mind? The one thing I do want to remind everyone, we are recording this. So if there's, for instance, a individual or situation that you'd like to talk through or get some help on, let's not use real names. Let's, we can say ages and sex, but not use the names and anything that might identify them. Just keep their privacy there. Keep that in mind. But otherwise, we're wide open to talk through anything you guys want. If there's, if you need help getting volunteers, if help, what are the next steps with what you're doing? We also have, we can also take advantage of who we have on here. Tap into Renee too. If you've got some individuals at your churches who may be hearing impaired or deaf, how can we better minister to our individuals? I'm sure Renee's got a bunch of tricks up her sleeve with that, a lot more than I do. So that's why we're looking to partner with their organization and be able to take this a whole nother step further. Mm-hmm. So saying all that, any thoughts, where we want to start? This time is all yours, anywhere you want to go. If you guys don't have something, I can come up with something. So why don't we do that? And Renee, I'm going to pick on you.
Okay.
Since we got you. Okay.
Okay.
So why don't we just talk about how we can help meet the needs of an individual that might be in our ministry on a Sunday morning who is hearing impaired, maybe not fully deaf. As Renee shared, her son has cochlear implants. They may have cochlear implants, but they're hearing impaired. What are steps that we can take in our children's ministries, in our special needs ministries, to help welcome them in and meet their needs so that they can learn?
Okay.
I know that's a big.
Yeah, no, it's okay. First off, I think being culturally sensitive. So hearing loss and deafness is the only disability really that has its own culture centered around that. And a lot of that is because of the psychosocial aspects of being deaf, whether that is you just have hearing loss. And again, it's like there's a scale, right? There's a continuum, if you will, ranging from you don't hear anything and you're reliant on sign language all the way to I have a cochlear implant and I can hear with that specific prosthetic device, and or I have hearing aids and I have residual hearing that can be amplified with the use of hearing aids. So with that being said, there's a wide variety, right? When we're talking about deafness and when I say culturally acceptable terms, that oftentimes is the capital D deaf, meaning you're in the deaf community and you identify as using American Sign Language as your main mode of communication. So when we look at that, then we have like hard of hearing, which is, and even when we talk about deafness, that would be like a capital D, culturally deaf, and also you have hearing loss, right? Versus lowercase d deaf, you have hearing loss, but you might not sign. In which case we say hard of hearing. That is the newer term. We don't use the term hearing impaired any longer, as that can be offensive. It's just not politically correct these days. Make sense? So,
yeah, that's good.
Okay, so understanding those terms and understanding types of hearing loss is, I think, one of the first things we need to do. And in terms of providing interpreting services, even if it's one person, right? Do you have interpreters who are able to facilitate that communication and provide interpreting services, and the necessity to have professional interpreters, not just somebody who learned to sign or signed like 10, 20 years ago, but looking for qualified sign language interpreters. And generally speaking, a professional sign language interpreter will have an educational background or equivalence, right? So you've taken standardized testing to show your fluency. Okay. And so there's standardized tests, much like doc, you've got to have specialized tests in order to become a medical professional, right? So that's where we're at with interpreting. Is there are requirements to be able to facilitate interpreting, not just signing, but to facilitate communication from one language to another. Is that a good jumping off point?
Yep. No, that's good. So let's talk about some easy things that we might be able to do. And I'll use an example of a child that I had in my ministry that I struggled with very honestly. So I had, and forgive me, I want to say it's been a while now, 7 or 8 years old, somewhere in that ballpark, hard of hearing.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember, it may be almost completely deaf, but
Okay.
but pretty much.
In terms of, they can't just use auditory input in a crowded setting or even in a quiet setting. They can't rely just on that. And lip reading is maybe 30% accurate at best.
And she was young enough, she didn't learn the lip reading yet.
Okay.
She was trying to learn that. She knew sign though, and she was pretty proficient. No one in our ministry knew sign language.
Okay.
We had no interpreters.
Okay.
And so before I share what I ended up doing and how we made it through that, maybe you've got some thoughts on, because we might have that, London and Rahel, you may have a new family that shows up to your ministry on some Sunday, and they may have someone who's deaf or hard of hearing, and we may not have an interpreter in our back pocket. We may not have a Renee that's in our back pocket that we can use. So what might be some things that we can do to help meet the needs right then and there while we're in the moment?
Okay.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. There's all kinds of like videos that you can tap into. So I would say with SOAR, even creating a good video resource that is accurate, because there's a lot out there that is just people generating their own videos. You don't want to search this up on YouTube, just a general search, right? So you want to make sure that you understand good resources, which could be sign language dictionaries that are online that have video information. Deaf Bible. Wow, that's a fantastic resource, right? So reputable sites that can support the use of signing. Now, and then from there, understanding how to contact an interpreting agency, should that be the need. I would say when we're looking at disabilities in general, it never hurts to learn the manual alphabet, just your ABCs, right? And so that's the starting place, is teaching your staff a basic sign. The basic sign for more, thank you, please, bathroom, right? Or we're gonna eat, and even like stop, right? Stop. No, thanks. No. Right. A lot of it you can incorporate gestures, but having some of that basic signs, which will help any individual, most likely, who is nonverbal. So when we look at disabilities in general, so much of that includes being nonverbal. Right.
No, go ahead.
I'm not sure. Like, I think just having an understanding of where to find accurate resources and how to maybe train staff members on basic interactions, because sometimes it just doesn't present. It's like, you can't just look and go, oh yeah, you're totally deaf. I get it. Right. Or you're hard of hearing. Like, you might not realize. And say, for instance, like in our church background, there has been families that have foster care kiddos. And they specifically accept children who have disabilities. And so being aware of that, they might preemptively say, hey, you know, if they're a member of the church, but there's others who maybe they're foster parents and they didn't realize that, but there's a need. And so they welcomed a child into their home that now they realize, oh, wow, like maybe they were on the autism spectrum, but in actuality, what is going on is lack of communication, and they have never been tested for hearing loss. And so that could be the primary disability, and then the autism, but oftentimes that gets missed. Or if it's progressive loss, it can get missed. And when kiddos going to kindergarten, especially if there are families that did not have hearing testing for their kiddo at the hospital, right? But yeah, I think just being prepared in that respect of like, in a sense, you know how God is like, okay, there's going to be a need, but we don't wait for that need. We're prayerfully setting aside funds. We're looking for opportunities. And so I think being proactive, knowing it'll happen. Maybe not now, maybe it hasn't happened, but it will. And so preparing with some of those basic science skills can help. And then from there, you can springboard into, wow, if they're going to be a regular member and attender, then how do we meet their needs?
Right.
And then of course we can, help you with setting up interpreters and such.
Yeah. So all great things. I think that's key. I used to know the whole alphabet. So I quickly tried to, freshen up on that. And that's something you can quickly find on Google.
Yes.
Real easy, and refresh yourself, get that done in minutes. The other thing to remind yourself, just because they're hard of hearing or deaf doesn't mean they can't communicate with you. So a simple piece of paper and writing, works as well, especially, because a lot of times they're able to read with that. The 7 or 8 year old girl was able to do that. The other thing I found that actually helped partially, and I can't remember it for the life of me. I was just checking my phone. I don't think it's on my phone anymore, unfortunately. I found an app just real quick while I was looking that I could say into the app what I was trying to sign. And then all of a sudden these hands would appear and sign it for me. So I was able to sign to her, which was marvelous. And she definitely understood it and got it because she immediately signed back to me. I'm like,
oh now what?
what did she just say? And I'm like,
yeah, that's the hard part, is it's a one-way translation, right?
It is. Right. So I loved the app and that I could talk to her, but it stopped there. So I thought this was great, but then I'm like,
yeah,
it is a one way. So we got to be careful with that.
Right.
And so trying to find other ways. And so, it just makes that tricky. But the important thing, which she was appreciative and the parents are super appreciative, we're trying to welcome her and try to have her be a part there and meet her needs with it. And if she ended up staying long term, we would have ended up getting an interpreter or find something.
Fantastic.
Even if that meant we had to pay for it. Because I looked at finding the interpreters. And I don't know about where you all live. I've already been surprised by Gabriel that the prices that you guys can find in that. But when I was looking at that point for interpreter, it was going to be $150 an hour was what I was being quoted by and that was coming from the School of Deaf and Blind. And I was getting a discount.
Right.
I don't know if it was a real discount, but whatever. But it's not. And when you're already dealing with a disability or a special needs ministry that doesn't have much budget to begin with,
right.
Adding an interpreter in there can completely decimate that. So the other thing, it's just start asking volunteers. it's amazing how many youth today who have a heart for individuals with special needs and disabilities are learning sign language. Many of them are learning, and they may not be fluent. We don't have to have someone fluent to be able to talk and help her through that. The other things that we did, we got the lesson. I quickly got on the internet and I started looking for pictures that would go along with what the lesson was that we were teaching that day. So all of a sudden now I'm trying to teach her that lesson one-on-one with pictures. And so, it's thinking out of the box with that.
For sure. I think realizing and understanding universal design for learning and making sure that you have multiple means of ways to convey the information is helpful. I think when it comes to just to put this out there, when it comes to using written language, it depends on the individual's age, right? If they've even, if they process language, or most deaf individuals who are reliant on, on one end of this, of the continuum, who are reliant on sign language, it's their second language, right? And so we, as hearing individuals, we learn to read. Well, first it's all auditory. And then when our teeth, tongue, and breath can all coordinate, then we're able to speak back and do echolalia and the whole process, right? For learning spoken language, then it's iconic. And so all those pictures, and then it's then letters, and it's using those, the symbols into reading and writing. And so with individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing, and they're reliant on sign language as their communication, they on average have a 4th grade reading level. But in perspective, the general public in a newspaper or a news program is at a 7th grade level. So, and that's just for the general public. So realizing the limitations of written language for an individual who is reliant on a visual language that has no auditory or written component is pretty key. Because what we're doing is we're trying to encourage them to use a bridge language, a bridge of written English. And still it's their second language.
Right. And that, honestly kind of goes hand in hand with what we try to teach for special needs disability ministries, as a whole, for elementary, middle school, high school. We're recommend teaching at a 3rd grade level for that. So that should line up there too. One other thing, just kind of, again, thinking through some things as you got someone who is hard of hearing or deaf, you can look at some of the other curriculum that's out there. Again, I'd recommend looking at Ability Ministry. They do a great job. They got their curriculum for children. They've got their curriculum for teens and for adults. And one of the things I absolutely love in that is that all of their Bible verses that they teach are all with sign language, so everyone can learn that. And especially our nonverbal friends. But then that's perfect for our friends who are hard of hearing and deaf. They can learn with that. And then it's also got the possibility of having closed caption on it, because it's a PowerPoint based video that you can do.
Perfect.
So those are some options that you can think outside the box if they end up staying with your ministry and making you their home church. So those are some other things that we can think through. But I thought while we had Renee here, this is something that we can talk on, because it's a topic we don't really get to talk on much. And I'm not going to say it's taboo. It's definitely not a taboo topic. It's just, doesn't get the attention it deserves with it. And frequently when someone shows up, a lot of times we're scrambling, trying to figure out, oh, what do we do now? Our heart, and I know everyone on here, our heart is to accept everyone we have and meet their needs and not turn them away. So I don't have any fear of anyone that's here today, or that might be watching this at some point, that they're sitting here thinking, oh, we just have to send them away. We want to find out what's best for them. So one of the other things I did I started asking my other volunteers, do any of you know sign language? Whether as a hobby or anything. I actually had one of the youth said, no, but they've been wanting to learn it, and they kind of sped themselves up and started learning that more. And then I did find another volunteer who she's extremely rusty, but she knew sign language. She said it had been about 5 years since she had really used it. She used to be fluent. And so what we ended up doing, she ended up kind of, if you would, doing a crash course for a couple of weeks, trying to get caught up on everything. And it was enough where she was then the next week was able to come in and volunteer, be the buddy with this individual. And all of a sudden they had their communication. They could talk back and forth with each other. Was she able to translate every single word? No, but I don't know, you can answer, Renee. I don't know if when you translate, if you truly get every single word, or if you're getting the gist of what's being translated.
It depends.
With it.
Really, it depends on the client. So
Okay.
if they want you to transliterate, which means to put it into English order because they have some hearing and they want it to be in English, or if they're highly educated and that is their preference. So realistically, the interpreter meets the needs of whatever the client wants to communicate in. So again, the lovely answer of it depends on how you interpret that. Sometimes you repackage everything completely and make it really ASL. We always want to try to be as much ASL as we can, because that's conceptually accurate. It's a visual language, but there are times where that's not what the person best understands. So you might actually use more of signed English to get the concepts across. So,
right.
But
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that it's so encouraging to see and hear your experiences, and that you did it well, right? That again, be having a heart of just wanting to connect with that individual in the best way that you can with your limited resources. But again, like you said, think outside the box, and there's always going to be a way. It might not be easy or even maybe the right approach, but you always can course correct and figure out, okay, that didn't work, let's try something else, right? And it's okay to make mistakes, because really the individual and the family is just so happy that you're trying to communicate, and that really shows when you really truly care and you want to just figure it out.
Yeah. Just a couple of little side tangents still related to this. One thing to remember and realize, I know a lot of us, will have, like a kids worship time where we've got worship music and everything. And you may have some actioneers doing signing, doing actions, not signing.
Right.
And that's the point I want to make. Most of those actions, that's not ASL. We might occasionally pull in some official ASL, like, Jesus is the official one that we see it frequently. But most of the other motions they do have nothing to do. I mean, they're not doing anything. They're just fun motions to do.
Yeah, hand movements for kids and like that music and dance and movement is really key, because it helps all the students to interact and internalize the message of, right? I mean, we want to always point them to Jesus. And it's interesting with a little elementary kiddo interpreting at church, that we have a stage set up, and then there's like other kid volunteers who are leading in the songs, right? So then there's two different video screens, and with the music and everything, and they have the lyrics on it, and then their kiddos same, like maybe a little bit older, like peer role model type things, who are in the Sunday school classroom. And it's like when we all get together. And but for me, sitting at the side of the stage and interpreting that information, and the kiddo then gets to decide, are they going to do the music, or are they like, and actually like sings with the words and the lyrics, or are they doing the hand movements? And it's a balance, right? Because there are kiddos who don't sing it and only do the dancing, right? Because it's just too hard, or they're not, no dancing, only trying to sing it, and so it's a process, which is really cool to see. Same age peers, typically developing peers, also doing a variety of movement and dance, and then the singing incorporated. That to learn how to do that, it's a process.
Right. And the other thing, again, it is all a process, but the important thing is to find out what works for your individual, and it's not always the same thing every time for everybody. The other thing that we did with this particular young lady, she, we didn't have anyone that could interpret the songs for her, and she somewhat liked the video. But what I found, I pulled her up and I had her stand right in front of the speaker. And not because she could hear it better, she felt the vibration more. And that's what she loved. And so she was able to worship through the vibration. She could get the sense of the song and everything that was going on by the vibrations that was going on. And that's what she preferred. So again, you may not like to be right there or that, but it's finding what works for the individual with that, and allowing them to be in a state that they can worship. One of the things that, I've said it a lot before, for instance, when I try to train up a church, worship leaders, one of the first things they always do whenever they stand in the church is to like, would you please stand and join us in worshiping today? Well, what if someone's in a wheelchair? What if someone just had a hip replacement or a knee replacement and they can't stand up? They feel discriminated that if they can't stand, they can't worship. Right. Well, that's not the case. And so, sometimes they'll make the change and say, well, if you're able, would you please stand and join us? Well, I don't like that either. What I teach, what I'd rather have them say is, would you please join us in worshiping from your heart today? Isn't that what it's all about? And then you just gave free reign. If they want to stand up, they can. If they want to sit down, they can. If they want to do somersaults or jump on the stage, great. They're worshiping from their heart. And I've had the somersaults and the jumping on the stage, and that's their form of worship. Well, let's allow that. But that's what it's all about. And we want to think about that too when we're in our ministry. And so that's one of the things I really want to stress. We can't, sometimes when we're kids ministry leaders and not necessarily just wearing our special needs hat or disability hat, sometimes we get into the thought, okay, we have to have everyone conform and be the same. All right, everyone sit down, crisscross applesauce spoons in the bowl. That doesn't work for everybody, and we know that. And it's okay if someone might want to stand in the background, or it's okay if someone's playing with a toy, or a fidget toy so that they can focus. It's okay if someone needs to stand right next to the speaker to have that vibration. Make it work for whatever that individual is. And our job also is then to inform and teach our leaders, our volunteers in the room, to be able to adjust and accept them where they're at and for who they are. And so that might be the bigger part that we've got, where you all are willing and understand that. But frequently we've got other teachers who are more old schooled, if you would, and by the book, that aren't that flexible sometimes. And we just need to encourage them to open their eyes to accept all of our friends at whatever point they're at. So with that, I think it's been some good discussion here. Any thoughts, Rahel or London, you guys have any thoughts or questions or anything with this on how to help welcome an individual who's hard of hearing or who is deaf?
I guess my only question is, do you know by any chance, like how much of the population falls into these categories, like a percentage, and then how much of that population attends church? Like, do we have people here at the lake who just are not choosing to go to church because they don't have a place for them? And if we offered that, then yeah, they would go to church, or if they're just non-church going.
Okay. So in terms of using sign language as for communication, 1% of the entire world relies on a form of sign language. Okay. It's even smaller when you think about that with those who are church attenders or like grew up in a Christian home, right? When we think about the fact that 90% of all deaf children are born to hearing parents, and of that, a small percentage ever learn to sign and to communicate with their children. So, which is why we have residential schools for the deaf. Okay, so they go to a school because their family does not sign with them at home. They don't have access to communication. And so when they're identified as having and needing specialized supports. So when we look at those who are attending church, I think it varies state to state. So I don't want to actually put any kind of statistics out there, but you should be able to locate the disability agency that is in charge of your state. So for ours, it's called the Council for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Okay, so you have a specific organization and an individual, like we have an executive director who is deaf himself and educated, and that organization, the Council for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, provides support services, helps individuals, especially legally, government-wise, if they're being discriminated against. We do have the Americans with Disabilities Act, as I'm sure you're aware of. And so that is part of it, right? And then when it comes to education services, then there's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, right? So we're looking at legal supports. So it's not that individuals don't have access to information, but I don't, for lack of a better way to explain it, you can't lead a horse to water and make them drink. So as we've all seen and have experienced, when you have parents who have children with disabilities, you either rise to the occasion or you let somebody else do that for you. Okay. And then to lead them. So I'm not even going to venture a number or statistics because I know it's changed and I can't, without looking it up specifically. I just know that most individuals who are grown up in a hearing family who are deaf, because there's lack of communication, they've never heard the gospel. And in terms of heard, as in nobody has shared it with them in sign. And so and their families, they maybe don't go to church with their families. If they do go to church, it's because their families probably sign with them or are able to get the right supports in place. Does that kind of answer your question, or do you have any follow-up on that?
No, I think that's really good. We were just curious. Not we, it's me. I'm the only one here.
I
was
think that's
curious.
a fabulous question, London, and I agree. I couldn't begin to put a number on it, but I'll do my best of some logical thinking with it. If right now we know that only 10% of families with an individual with special needs or disabilities attending church, I think it's a safe assumption to assume the number for our hard of hearing and deaf is way lower than that. I personally would guess, this is educated guess, under 5%. And I don't have a number, and maybe Renee, you've heard a number. I don't know the number of churches that even offer hearing services, ASL type services. I know that's very few and far between, but I do know the churches that do it, they usually have a large ministry because there aren't many of them. Maybe you can touch on that.
Yeah, oftentimes, like having a deaf population group. So we've got West Coast, East Coast, and then of course, Washington, DC area, right there because of Gallaudet University. But you have to have the population base. So larger cities are more apt to have opportunities and churches that provide interpreting services and support. Like Idaho is a rural state. My church is one of a handful in the state that provide interpreting services and any form of deaf ministry. And then from what we know of, our church is the only church that is hiring professional paid interpreters. We're trying to change that because like myself included, 15 years of volunteering my time and getting burnout and being a professional, but not serving in that capacity because it is, again, expensive. However, it's doable, and there's a lot of grant funding and organizations that want to support being able to have qualified interpreters in a variety of settings, including church. And when we look at all of this, for Idaho and throughout the country, religious entities are exempt from having to provide everything that is required in the community. Okay.
Right.
So often we'll back up on that and go, well, we don't have to provide that. And so we don't. Yeah.
So bottom line, it's safe to say very low number of churches offer the services. So we know only 11% of churches welcome families with disabilities. I know it's much less than that offer, ASL services and interpreting services. So I think it's safe to say that, overall it's a very low number, but I think it's the same thing. If those services were offered at a local church, and they have people that would recommend it, again, I believe it would probably be the same thing as it is with families with disabilities. They're not going to come just because you hang out a shingle that says we have a disability ministry. It's going to be by word of mouth. Hey, they actually know what they're doing. You got to come.
Yeah. And I would say that Champion Interpreting Services and my advocacy, Bloom Advocacy, we could put you in touch with individuals in your area, in your state, who we would recommend to be in touch with when it comes to the deaf community in your surrounding area. And you're at Calvary Chapel at the Ozarks, right?
Lake of the Ozarks, yes.
Yeah. And so I think making sure that you have the right resources, because my guess is, yeah, there's deaf people out there.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, but if they don't know, then they're not going to come to your church unless they know somebody who goes there, or they realize that, oh, there's going to be supports in place, or they reach out to you. But surprisingly, while we have all these wonderful laws in place, individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing, even like grown adults, don't know what these are. They don't know how to ask or how to advocate for themselves. As the same with families, unless they're going to learn and be trained up to be an advocate to spread awareness, they might not even know the right questions to ask, or that they have the opportunity. They might just think, oh, I don't go to church because, well, hearing people don't sign, and like Christians, like, because they've never met them. And also, like, even when you think about children growing up, sometimes a deaf child will think when they're an adult, they'll be hearing, they'll suddenly hear because they've never met another deaf like kid. They're the only one. It's a low incidence population. So I think having that isolation causes a lot of I wouldn't even say confusion, but just a lack of awareness of what's out there resource wise.
Well, I think it's the same. One of the major reasons why a family with a child with a disability or special needs doesn't go to a church is because they know what a burden their child is. They don't want to be a burden to the church. I think it's safe to say that translates to our deaf and hearing and hard of hearing community as well. I know in the case I shared, that was the reason they didn't stay at our church. Because they saw all the work I was doing at trying to meet the needs of their daughter, and they felt bad because they felt their daughter was a burden to us, which I kept saying, she's not a burden. We love her. We want to welcome her. And I'm happy to do this. You can't, as a parent, and I totally get it. You feel, there's that burden and you don't want someone to do an extraordinary amount of things. So, but there are some churches who do great things, and it doesn't mean we sit back and don't do anything.
Right.
I think it's good for us to be prepared for when something comes and think through it, have plans, because if we have a plan and have an action to know what our steps might be, and it's good. I'd suggest that everyone watching this just do a simple survey of your volunteers, of your church members, who knows ASL, and that,
or is willing to learn.
or willing to, yeah, absolutely, Renee, who's learning. You might be amazed to find out. And I know here in Kansas City, you can go to our community college and the course might even be free. I think they're even teaching a free course on ASL for the introduction one, not the advanced one, but that's a great option. And then here in town, and we've partnered with them, we have Deaf International Church, and that's one of our families, and I think Rahel, know them, and they're great, and so they do the entire service, with interpretation. The lead pastor and her husband, she's completely deaf. I knew her for about 3 years before I realized she was 100% deaf, because we'd have full communication all the time. She is such a great lip reader. It's amazing. It literally blew me away. She's very gifted.
With our son, and he has he earned 2 degrees from the University of Idaho, and like, people don't realize how deaf he is because of how well he articulates words, how well he lip reads. And he doesn't have to sign to you, but most of the people are hearing, so he doesn't need to sign, right? But he can sign, and he will sign, right, when with other individuals who need sign language. But yeah, and again, it is some of that when it comes to early intervention, education and training, and it's a pretty cool thing when you're able to use all of your resources, and you can switch how you communicate based on who you're with.
Right. I want to stress that one point too, that I know I was guilty of that, and it's a complete myth out there that if you're completely deaf, you cannot articulate or articulate well. And I'm not going to say this name trying to slam her or anything with that, but think of like the actress Marlee Matlin. Thank you. I just blanked out her last name. She's a great actress, but you can tell when she speaks that she's has hearing, hard of hearing or deaf.
Right.
This lady I'm talking about, right. I had no, and she's learned that how to articulate.
Right.
and they're able to.
Yeah. And and just to put this out there, we hear with our brains and with the vibrations, right? And so it depends on if you have access to auditory input or not, and at the age of onset that you had hearing loss, because for a lot of adults, maybe they had gradual loss. So they learned to hear and speak from a young age, and then they eventually lost their hearing. Because there's different types of deafness that, like say Usher syndrome, where you lose vision and hearing. So there's a variety of reasons, or you could have you could have like an illness that causes you with antibiotics and stuff, or ear infections to have hearing loss. So in terms of when we're thinking about speech production, you have to have the ability to process the auditory input and those vibrations, because sound is a vibration, which I just have to put it as an aside. God spoke, right? And that's a vibration. So when you think about that, and we think about vibrations and how he formed the world and everything in it, it's pretty amazing. And it's science. Like the more that we study science, the more that we see his work, right? So anyway, it's kind of cool.
Again, Renee, I appreciate you kind of jumping in. You know, again, like I said, this is a network. We all are experts in our own ways and can speak in, but I thought we'd take advantage of this. I know I've personally learned a lot today, and I hope it's something we can all apply for ourselves. So any other thoughts on this topic, or we can continue to talk here or move to something else? You know, I don't want to, you know, go on if we're good with that, but I think we've done a good job of covering this, and hopefully you've got some good starting points and have ideas now for if you've got an individual who's deaf or hard of hearing show up in your ministry.
One thing that I do want to add is that connect with your community as well. While we're churches, and we tend to separate out, right? Because we've got the like public school agenda, like whatever, right? Like, I mean, we have the separation of church and state, but there are individuals at your church who work in the school system, who have resources, right? Who maybe even might know this family, and they can connect with them at a different level. And all of your educators connected with your school system, whether that's public school, private school, charter school, homeschooling groups, the more that you can network with other individuals and organizations, just use them as a resource, because they probably, you know, would be willing to work with you and to make things successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add one more point while we're on that. And so this is Doc speaking here as well. I view this the same way as I view having a child with special needs or disability come into our ministry. If you sit there and tell the parent that their child is deaf or hard of hearing, that they're welcome only if the parent stays to translate or speak for them, that's not welcoming for them. Okay. So, you know, I always say you have to do the same thing that you do for everyone else in your ministry. If the other parents of your neurotypical children don't have to stay to take care of their kid, nor do the parents of the kids who have special needs or disabilities, nor do the parents of the kids who are deaf and hearing, hard of hearing. So we need to make sure of that, because that parent needs to go to service and get fueled as well and get their tank filled up. Because if they're coming in and having to do all that, let's be honest, why are they even coming to church? They might as well just stay at home and do it themselves.
Right.
And so, you know, that's not welcoming and they are very open to helping you have ideas and talk through things, but they just don't want to have to do it all themselves.
Right. I would add that asking a sibling, a typically developing sibling, to remain, even if they're the same age group. Our daughter, who is hearing, she's 21, so they're very close in age, but their listening age is almost the same. Okay, so, but she has grown up her whole life, and I mean, praise the Lord, she's going into the medical field. She just graduated, and she wants to do this because she knows what it's like. She knows what it's like to attend her brother's meetings all the time, and she's fascinated with that. God has instilled her just the willingness to serve, and she's fascinated with all things medical. So, wants to do like Doctors Without Borders, like get it right. But she has been asked so many times growing up, and it's a little bit of a burden that she carries because she loves her brother,
Right.
And people will just default to her and ask her to communicate, or because they don't know how to sign. And this, from experience, has been like in a when they were in the same classroom for like a charter school, where our son was exploring his deafness and wanted to take his implant off, and also proving a point of why interpreters are necessary, because he didn't present like a typical deaf kid. And then teacher having anxiety and asking sister to step in the role of interpreter. So that adds a whole other layer and dimension. So yeah, parents and siblings, like
that's a
they
great
they need to be fed. They need to have a break.
Totally agree with that. I'm glad you added that point. Yeah. So, all right. What else can we be talking about? How can we help one another? Anything that you guys are struggling with, any challenges you might have in ministry right now that you'd like to talk through?
We just have a couple, can you hear me? Okay. We just have a couple of kids, preschool age, so they're fun right now. Anyways, who are just very mobile and up all the time. And like we're trying to work on the buddy system, but that's also hard when we're also trying to get volunteers just to serve in general as well. So we're making a big push from now until fall to do all of that. But is there anything that we can do? Like, we don't want them to have to be forced, like, sit down, like you have to sit down, because we know that, that's not okay either. We've tried fidget toys, we've tried one-on-one. We don't want to ask mom to come in. This mom has actually come up to me and said, I would like to serve in the classroom. Like, I need to see for myself what he does. And that's fine if she comes up to me. That's different. But is there anything that we can do on our end?
Yeah. So I do a couple different things. And first off, just from my background, my experience, I'm fine with mom serving. I don't put her in the child's room. I put her in another room, because you might get worsening behaviors. Mom will always, can't jump in, and we just want her to have break in. If she really wants to serve, let's get her to serve somewhere else. She needs that mental break from her child with that. And I'm not trying to be mean with that, but that's just one thing there.
I have a 2.5-year-old and I don't like serving in her room.
Yeah. It's
better
hard.
for everybody else.
Every time I've ever served in my kids' rooms, it was much harder. Always. So yes, I think the biggest help would be to have those one-on-one buddies, and then training those buddies so they know what to do. That's the important thing. Need to get more volunteers. So one thing to do on trying to get more volunteers, first, be watching these kids that you already have who have the disabilities. One thing I love with individuals with special needs and disabilities, they have this innate ability to see directly into someone's heart. They don't care what their outside looks like, what sex they are, the color skin or the hair or anything. They know if you like them or not, period. And if you like them, they're going up to you. If you fake it, they know it and they're going to leave you alone. Well, watch who they go up to and who they, try to friend or talk to on Sunday mornings. Those are your potential new volunteers. And then you have conversations with them. And that's going to be one great way you can help get them in, and just share about that. Again, when you're trying to recruit, let people know there's one requirement to be able to serve. Can you be a friend? That's it. That's the only requirement there is. Can you be a friend? You don't have to know everything else. You don't have to be a special ed teacher or a therapist or anything else. You just need to be willing to be a friend. I have yet, either as a physician or as a parent, ever met a single person who's been given an instruction manual on how to take care of their child when they've received a diagnosis. They end up learning how to take care of them by spending time with them. And that's what it is. It's a relationship. And ministry is all relationship, but especially our disability ministries is relationship based. And then you can have a buddy backpack or a buddy box, a sensory box in a room. And in that, I would have a couple different things. You can have some of the fidget toys in there. And some of the best fidget toys are completely free. You can get McDonald's Happy Meal toys. 80% of McDonald's Happy Meal toys make perfect fidget toys. And parents are going to donate those to you like crazy. So that's completely free, because the kids quit playing with them as soon as they leave McDonald's. And then all you do is step on them as the parent. And so parents love getting them out of the house. Two, I'd also put in some different size balls that they can squeeze and different things with. Get headphones, noise canceling headphones. Those are anywhere from $6 to $8. We're not talking expensive. I also recommend going to the dollar store and getting the dollar sunglasses, because the lights might be something that's bothering them too. So allowing them wear the sunglasses and have that. And then if you've got some extra money, want to do some extra thing, you can get maybe something that vibrates or something like that for them too. But then allowing them to have that when they need that. It's absolutely okay to let them stand up in the back of the room or walk around, as long as they're being quiet while doing it. If they're messing with someone else, that's where we want the volunteer, the buddy, to step in and help prevent that. But the thing that's important, if you've got a volunteer who's working with them and they've never been trained on how to help them, it's not going to be successful. And so, that's one of the things I'm really big on, is training to make sure everyone is prepared to take care of that. And so, the training needs to teach them how to be a buddy, how to identify possible behaviors, how to prevent that behavior from happening. And the thing we have to remember is all behavior is a form of communication. All behavior is a form of communication. So it might be they're trying to communicate something good. They might be trying to communicate something bad, but they're trying to tell you something. It's our job to figure out what they're trying to communicate. Many of our individuals, especially in your preschool age, are nonverbal. And so they're not able to necessarily use their words. Their behavior is really what is going to be doing that. So that's where it's vital that we're learning that. So teaching our volunteers that is vital. And that's where I like to not just train the special needs disability volunteers, but I want to train all the children's ministry, all the student ministry, all the welcome team, everyone who comes in contact with a family, so that they can understand how to deal with that. The other thing is, trying to recruit those volunteers. And yeah, that's Renee's got
I wanted to show you this. Yeah,
I love you sign. I love that one.
Yeah, because I got this for gifts for students and stuff, but also working with smaller kiddos. But the IOY, it's, most people know it. And it goes with our message of Jesus loves you, right? And I love you, and we all want to be here for you. So yay.
Those are super popular, and you can get bags of like 20 or 25 of them for like $15. They've become when they first came out, they were insanely expensive, but they're dirt cheap now. You can get
And
on
it's-
Amazon.
It's better than the spinners,
Oh my gosh, yes.
right?
Yeah.
Which can be distracting in their own right.
Yes, yeah. I try not to have the spinners, but those are great. The other, I don't have one here. One other thing, if you do want to pay, it's amazing. It is this hard nylon mesh with a marble in it, and it's sewn up on both ends. And so they can push the marble back and forth. It's about 3 inches long. And they'll sit there all day pushing that marble. If it's someone who is a biter, they might even bite on it, but they're not going to chew. I've yet to have anyone chew through it. I have to clean them, but that's a real, I think that, I want to say it was only like 80 cents a piece, 75 cents a piece. So, we're not talking a ton there. But here's the other thing on getting volunteers. Our biggest problem as ministry leaders in every church, no matter what the ministry is, we keep going after the same people who are volunteering everywhere. And so just about every church I know has an 80-20 rule. 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. And as a ministry leader, and I've been there, we're constantly going after that same 20%. And that's why the churches always say, we don't have enough volunteers. Well, you have the volunteers, you just haven't gotten the right volunteers because we're asking the same one. And so with that 80-20 rule, what that tells me, every Sunday, we have 80% of the people in your church coming in and sitting in your church, and they're nothing more than glorified knickknacks, collecting dust during the message and then getting up, knocking off the dust and walking out. That's all there are glorified knickknacks. They're the ones we have to go after. So here, and I may have already done this with you, but I'll do it again as a refresher. The 4 most important letters in the alphabet when it comes to volunteer recruitment, and this is vital. 4 most important letters are I, C, N, U. I, C, N, U. And let me tell you how this works. So with this, first off, your main job as a ministry leader on a Sunday morning is not making sure ministry's working, making sure all the kids are where they'd be, making sure the volunteers are there, making sure you get the curriculum. Yes, you got to do that. Your number one job is observing every person that walks into your ministry area. And you're looking for skills and characteristics that would make a good volunteer for you. And so let me show you how this would work. In London, I'm going to use you for my example, okay? I would say I'd be observing you and I'd literally would come up to you on Sunday morning. I'd put my hand on your shoulder and I go, hey, London, great to see you today. How are you? Usually great. Hey, London, I just need to let you know what? I've just been observing you the last few weeks, and I have to let you know, I see in you someone who's got an amazing heart for people. I see in you someone who's passionate and someone who has patience. And I've got a quick question for you. Can you be a friend? Guess what? I've never yet had a person tell me no, they can't be a friend. They'll usually say yes. I'm like, fantastic. That's the only requirement we have to serve in our disability ministry, serving with our individuals with special needs. You don't need to have any training, any background, because we can train you on everything. You just need to be willing to be a friend. Now, I've got a favor to ask of you, London. Would you please take the next 2 weeks and pray and see if God would have you serve in this ministry? And maybe we can grab a cup of coffee in a couple of weeks and talk about it. Would that be okay? Guess what? I've never had anyone tell me no, they won't pray, especially when you're asking them at church. They're not going to do it. When I meet them in 2 weeks, I have a 90 to 95% success rate at getting them as a volunteer. And the overwhelming majority of them have told me, Doc, I thought you were going to ask me to serve that day. And if you did, I was going to tell you no. Well, why did this work? 1, I made a personal touch. I literally tapped you on the shoulder and then I told you, hey, I see these great things that's going to work in our ministry. I told you, I see in you these characteristics. 3, I told you You told me you can be a friend, and that's the only requirement we've got. Yeah, there's background checks and training, but you just need to be willing to be a friend. Now, here's the tricker. Did I ask you to serve? No, I asked you to pray. I let God do all my heavy lifting for me. And so I let God convict your heart and do that, so that when we meet back again, then, they come in and go, Doc, I wasn't going to do it, but oh my gosh, God's just making it clear I need to do this. Fantastic. Now, when I meet with them at that 2-week point, here's where we can be led astray. And let me warn you of a minefield. And I did this all the time as in my early days as the kids pastor and that. Someone would then say, oh yeah, I'm in, I'll serve with you. I'd be great. What would you like to do? The answer I usually got back, and I'm sure you guys have heard this, where's your biggest need? Oh my gosh, that was wonderful. I love that answer. I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord. And I would tell them, and they'd always just put me there. Guys, that is bad juju. It is straight from the pit of hell, okay? That is not what you want to hear, because that volunteer is not going to stay. You're probably going to have them for 2-3 months max. They're doing it as a favor, and then they're gone because they get burned out. So I never ask what they want to do. My first question for them after they commit, hey, London, what are you passionate about? What floats your boat? And then I find out what that is. And then I try to match that passion with the area of volunteering. And guess what happens? When you can match passion with volunteer, you've got someone for the long haul. Mm-hmm. And so I'll give you a perfect example of that. I had a young lady in her 20s I was recruiting. I needed a female buddy for a 17-year-old girl I had in our teen class. And I thought this lady would be perfect. I did the ICNU, the whole thing. She came back and she said, Doc, I didn't even need 2 weeks. Yes, I'm in. I'll do it. And then I go, what are you passionate about? And I'm never going to forget this. She goes, Doc, and she just lights up. And watch, when people tell you what they're passionate about, they light up. And she goes, I just love telling people how proud I am of them and encourage them to be the best that they can be. I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm like, yeah, that could be a buddy. That could work. But I'm going, is that the best use of that gifting? And then God just kind of flicked me on the head. And I'm like, oh, that's it. And I'm like, you know what we could really use? I need a volunteer encouragement coordinator who once a month will encourage all my volunteers and thank them for giving their time to me and serving in our ministry. Would you do that? She lit up and said, oh, that'd be amazing. And so I gave her, a small budget. And like 2 weeks later, we picked the first Sunday. She made a little bag that had a graham cracker, a marshmallow, and a small Hershey bar in it, a Ziploc baggie, and put a note that she did up real cute and said, we need more volunteers like you. That baggie cost me 6 or 7 cents a piece to make. Every one of our volunteers got it, and they all loved it and felt appreciated. The second month, she made another little baggie, put 3 Starbursts, little wrapped Starbursts in it, and then made another little thing and says, you are a star with us, and we are bursting with pride to have you as a volunteer. Again, took off like crazy. Guess what happened after 2 months? 2 things happened. One, she came back and said, you know what, Doc, this isn't enough. God's telling me I need to be a buddy as well. Praise God. I ended up getting that buddy on top. She goes, but I want to continue doing this. And then I started seeing something I never anticipated. I had volunteers leave other ministries and come to our ministry because they wanted to be appreciated, because they were not being appreciated in their ministry. They were being treated like a number. And all of a sudden they were feeling in our ministry like they were being appreciated as an individual and treated like family. And so that made a huge difference. If I never thought it through that would help. So that's a long story there with helping get the volunteers to get them in place, but you got to get them trained. have the sensory boxes. You can have one in each room, or have one area that they can go to, and that'll help. But they need to have guidance to know what to do. They also need to understand simple things on limit setting, if then statements, first then statements. So if Johnny, we'll call him, is one of your preschoolers and gets up and keeps going over to the back of the room to do something, we can tell him, hey, Johnny, first we're going to sit in the circle for the lesson, then we're going to go to the table for snack time. Well, he needs to know that now he understands, okay, I'm going to sit here, and then, or you can say, Johnny, if you sit with us in our circle, then you're going to get to go have a snack at the table. Okay, now he knows, well, if I'm not sitting here, I'm not getting it. All of a sudden, they're going to do the things we're asking. The other thing, real quick on behavior, and then I'll stop with that. This is something I wish I knew when my kids were young. It would have made my life so much easier. What do we normally say when either our own kids or kids in our ministry are doing something we don't want them to do? We say, hey, don't run, stop running, don't hit. We tell them what we don't want them to do, right? Does it usually work? Not usually. Well, it wasn't until many years later that I started thinking, and then my medical background came in and hit me across the head. Our brain is wired to only hear the last word we hear. So when we're telling them not to do something, they're only hearing that word. So it dawned on me when I'm telling a kid stop hitting and they're hitting me, don't hit, as they continue to hit me. And so we need to tell them a different behavior to do. And it's amazing how quick that changes. But let me give you an example. Do not think of an elephant. Stop thinking of an elephant. Do not think of an elephant. What are you thinking of? I bet it's not a squirrel. You're thinking of an elephant because of that last word, but I told you not to. You still thought of it. That's the way our brain works. But instead, if I would say, okay, if instead of someone running or hitting, instead I could say, hey, let's come draw something on the board. Okay, you give them a positive behavior that's different. The overwhelming majority of the time, you'll break that behavior and you'll get that response. And you won't have the fight. So that's some of the things that we teach, and that's what I do with all my training, teach them, and that can make a big difference. So does that help, Lyndon?
Yeah, I actually remember you talking about this a little bit. So I used it a couple weeks ago on a volunteer, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna follow back with you after our kids event for which she was serving. So I knew I could really like observe her there too.
Yeah.
She ended up not serving. She had to go out of town. But she came back to me like the next week and she goes, we don't even need to meet. I'll do it. I was like, cool. Love
There
it.
you are.
So I'm trying to now teach like the rest of my team, like, hey, you guys need to be in this with me and recruit people. Here's how you're gonna do it. Like
Right.
when you see a parent come to pick up their kid, do this, please. Like,
So here's the thing. There's a church back east that I've trained, and they had me come in and I trained their entire staff and all their leaders on how to do this.
Mhm.
I am not kidding you. Their church now, they have an 80-20 rule, but 80% of the church is volunteering. 20% is not. They've completely flip-flopped that. It's the only church I know right now that's like that. And it's because they've done that, and you go after that 80%, or now in their case, the 20% that's not doing anything. But we're all called to be a part of the church. That's what God wants. And our individuals with special needs and disabilities need to be included in that. They're called to serve. That's what the second part of Luke 14 is. Where when they're talking about the wedding feast, and Jesus says, bring in the lame, bring in the blind, bring in the deaf, and give them a seat of honor at the table. That's meaning allow them to be seen, allow them to serve, so that you will be blessed, so that your church will be blessed.
Yeah.
And he will bless them. So.
We have an individual at our church with special needs, and serves along with with their parents to hand out the notes,
Yeah.
to hand out the bulletin, right?
Yeah.
And it is just so amazing. And it really spoke to me when you were talking about how they're going to know, right? Like, it's just this innate ability to know if you really want to be their friend or you're faking it, like, right? And I just look at that and I think, oh, that's perfect, right? Like, that's really cool. And so to asking them to be involved in whatever capacity it is, but again, like that host team, that being inviting, because they are already inviting, if that's their, if that's their personality, right? Which
Right.
it might not be. But when you have an individual with special needs who that is their personality, right? Where they are just loving and kind, and it just comes out, right? So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. What else you guys got? Or you want an extra 20 minutes back to your day?
Well,
I can always go on forever. You guys know
I
that.
didn't know what to expect. I was just supposed to be here as a proxy. So I'm like, oh, well,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to tell Gabriel, sorry. I know I was just supposed to watch and observe, but I was called upon.
Well, he should know, just from some of the conversations he's had with me, everyone gets to play when you're with me. So, and we can all learn from one another. So,
For sure.
Rahel, did you seriously say that Caleb is now 19?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, he can't be. I'm really feeling old now, but
Yes, he is 19, always.
all right, you got to give my boy a big hug for me and tell him hi from Doc.
I will.
So, all right. Well, any other things we can talk through? All right. Well, we've had some good discussion here today. A couple things to let you know about. One, for those around the area here, we in 2 weeks are kicking off our summer camps. We've got the week of July 10th, we'll be in Lee Summit. The week of July 17th in Overland Park, we host the nation's largest disability day camp. We take all ages, diagnoses, and severities. Right now, we could use more volunteers at both places. If any of you that are in town, especially or near here, know anyone with any medical background, we need more nurses and medical help. Right now, we've got a big shortage of that, and I found a way we can fill it, but that's by hiring it done, and that's going to cost us $30,000, which we didn't budget for. So we're praying that God will provide for that. So I'll just ask that you join us in prayer for those 2 weeks. But we're excited. We're getting everything done. It's Camp Dinosaur, and it's SOAR for dinosaur. We're going to have a great 2 weeks of camp. We're going to be teaching creation, and teaching that all of our friends are created on purpose and for a purpose, and they're created in the image and likeness of God. And then we're going into the fall of man, and then the death and resurrection of Jesus, and how he came into the world to save them. So but I ask you to please be praying for not just our campers, that God opens their heart to hear the message that we'll be sharing, but also all of our volunteers. We've got many people who are coming to it who this is the only time they'll ever be at a church. We've got 2 churches hosting us. And so we're excited about that, and just want to share the gospel and have a great week. But the great thing is it's going to be 40 hours of respite care for these families, those 2 weeks. Each week's 40 hours. So that'll be a great thing for them. But we will meet again next month. Our next meeting, again, we meet the 4th Thursday each month. Next month, let me get my July calendar, is going to be July the 27th. And being an odd month, we will be from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. So that link is already up. If you registered for this, you could you can actually, I've set up where you can actually register for all of them, and I'll send out reminders for that. But invite some others to come to it too. If you need anything in the meantime, just holler at us and we'll see what we can do. If you do ever end up with questions on how to help those who are deaf or hard of hearing, just contact me and I'll put you in touch with champions and interpreting services, and they'll be able to help guide you, and we'll help you along. We are in talks with them to see how we might be able to partner together to just be able to help serve the church as a whole even more. We are one big C church and want to be able to serve all of our families and friends and let them know that they are all welcomed, and we are called to welcome everyone into our church, not just those who are just like us, but we're called to welcome everybody with that. So with that, let me just close us in prayer, and then I'll give you some extra time to your day. Heavenly Father God, we thank you for this day, and just praise you for all that you do. Thank you for the group that's with us today. Just be with them as they continue to welcome families into their churches, help give them wisdom and just guide them as they do that. Help them get the volunteers that they need. Help them in the whole process. God, I lift up our camps to you the next couple of weeks, that you provide the volunteers, that you just prepare the hearts of the campers and the volunteers to hear your message. And God, we know we are all created in the image and likeness of you, and that we're all fearfully and wonderfully made, that no one is a mistake. And you know, we are all created on purpose and for purpose. And Lord, just thank you for this day now, and help us to be effective in welcoming these amazing individuals into our churches. And we pray this now in your great and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next month. Have a great month, and we'll see you later.
Okay.
See you. Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.